Hi there, this is Digital Loop Season 2, Episode 22. I told you that we would have a surprise last week, but here's a surprise. Hi, David. Hi, David. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, great. So David is actually in Dubai, so it must be actually very, very hot, and I'm sure he has air conditioning. Our good friend Ivan. Hi, Ivan. How are you?
Hi, Paul. Yes, I'm here in Warsaw, also very hot, not as hot as Dubai, but yes, having a great time here and really looking forward to the show.
Well, we're really lucky because the rest of Europe is actually having lots of rain, and basically we are the three of us are in a sunny weather. So, David, I'm gonna let him introduce himself a bit, but I called the show the Disruption Revolution because it's the title of a book that he has just released. That is really kind of fascinating. He's talking to 20 different thought leaders about everything that has been changing in digital recently, and I think it's a very, very good handbook about if you want to understand innovation. But I'm first going to let him introduce himself and maybe ask him why he's in Dubai. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi. So my name's David Passiak. I've written a couple of books. My most recent book was Disruption Revolution, which you just mentioned, which is basically a series of thematic interviews around disruptive innovation. The idea behind the title was that I started to see this pattern shortly after the economy crashed in 2008, 2009, of people starting to rally around this term disruption. I think particularly after the TechCrunch Disrupt conference came out, and it was like the economy crashed and all these things were going around, and all of a sudden disruption became this kind of good thing. As innovators, you saw all these budgets kind of shifting from traditional print and television into social media. You started seeing all these innovations in analytics, in mobile, and social platforms. And then, of course, all of that type of those collaborative technologies allowed people to have better workflows internally at organizations, which allowed them to innovate and iterate faster and faster and faster. So the idea of a disruption revolution is looking at this revolution of innovation across all these different fields and people kind of rallying around the term disruption. In terms of my background, I've been working in social media and technology startups for about the last 10 years, and before that, I did PhD studies in religion and culture at Princeton. And so, when I was in my graduate studies, basically, study of religion and culture is basically the study of worldview. So I look primarily at how media and technology and innovation have influenced religion and culture, primarily from the 50s, the civil rights movement, and the 60s counterculture movement up to the present. So a lot of the thinking in the Disruption Revolution book that I just published kind of combines the stuff that I've been doing in innovation with this kind of broader thinking about shifting worldviews that's kind of informed from my PhD studies at Princeton. And then in terms of why how I ended up in Dubai, which we can maybe get into a little bit later in the show after kind of going through some of the core ideas from the book. Basically, I offered Disruption Revolution kind of in the spirit of the collaborative economy. I offered it available by donation. So it features folks like Seth Godin and Chris Anderson, Robert Scoble, Jeremiah Aoyang, all these kind of incredible thought leaders. And I offered the book by donation, and then of course someone in Dubai read the book and then recommended it to the entire company, and then that led to a series of conversations. And next thing you know, I'm on a plane and packing up all my stuff in New York and moving to Dubai. So my new role is head of innovation and research for a site called Dubizzle. And Dubizzle is the largest peer-to-peer marketplace in the Middle East. So we're doing a lot of really kind of cool stuff here, which we can talk about a little bit later in the show as well.
Yeah, we'll do. Actually, what I find fascinating in the fact that you've done these studies, when I read your profile, It's because actually when you look, you mentioned 15th century. I'm not a scholar like you are, but basically when we think about the current revolution, when we think about the abundance and the ease at which we can actually spread information. I mean, the story of religion or the story of media are closely related. You know, there was one book that could only be printed by a very, very few, and then it becomes that the information can be, and I'm making a very big shortcut here, but the information can be spread by everyone. And I mean, we're more in control of our information. We're more we're becoming, all of us become creators in the spreading and the virality of information. So I think this is why I was very fascinated by your first book that we'll talk afterwards. But going back to your current book, I mean, I've seen, of course, there are on your website, and we'll mention it, of course, on the website of our show. There are all these names listed. There's a few excerpts as well, and I see that you've gone. You started with why disruption is a new norm, and then you went with entrepreneurship, and then the enterprise, something that people tend to forget. Why these chapters in this way? Why have you chosen these people? What was the thinking behind it?
So it took me probably about, I'd say, about a year and a half, 2 years to come up with the right format for the book. Initially, my thinking was that I was just going to write this book myself, and then I realized, well, no, I should take this kind of wisdom of the crowd approach. And so basically the book is divided into 4 parts, which is kind of based upon an innovation strategy process that I've kind of developed over the last 10 years or so. So basically, you start by looking at the big picture. So you look at external trends in the marketplace. You do that from a perspective of innovation to identify possible opportunities as well as potential threats. And I think that you need to integrate monitoring tools on an ongoing basis, any type of organization you run, to be constantly aware of changes and fluctuations in the marketplace. So that's kind of sort of phase 1 of the innovation strategy. I think phase 2 is because we're kind of entering this sort of period of history where disruption is the new norm, and things are constantly changing exponentially faster and faster. And I think that that's not going to change. It's just going to keep getting more and more disrupted. That it's very critical for a leadership team to understand who you are, why you exist, and what's your purpose. Like, what are your core values as an organization? Because when everything is shifting around you, you need to have something that is sort of like your North Star, right? The thing that is kind of fixed, the thing that motivates you to get up in the morning and come to work every day. And so I think that, you know, whatever your organization is, whatever you're doing, you need to have your sense of purpose. And then ultimately, it's not only to keep you grounded, but it also helps you with employee retention. It helps you to make sure that everyone is kind of excited as a team. And it's really important for the leaders to kind of embody those values of an organization. And so then you go from these kind of like external trends and your core values to then you start thinking about your core operations and processes, because you know, I think there's this kind of misconception that a lot of people have around innovation of, you know, some sort of Einstein-like genius sitting in a corner that just kind of comes up with these amazing ideas, and then all of a sudden the world changes. You know, I mean, that's the kind of myth around someone like, you know, Mark Zuckerberg, right? He's this genius kid in his bedroom at Harvard, and all of a sudden he comes up with this idea, and then the world changes. But that's really not how innovation actually happens. You know, innovation is a lot of really hard work. It's a lot of testing. It's a lot of accepting failure and understanding that failure is an opportunity to learn and grow. And so when you think of how you scale innovation, you need to put in place kind of best practices in terms of your core operations and how you organize your team. And so the third part of the book is really about that. About building what Scott Anthony refers to as a growth factory. The idea that you can innovate to create new products and services the same way that a company or that a factory traditionally creates products and services. And then, of course, the fourth part of the book is just basic marketing and communications. That you can have the most innovative product or service in the world, but it's never going to get any traction if you don't know how to communicate the value of it to people, right? I think one of the key things that I've learned in the last 10 years or so is that a lot of times it's a really delicate balance doing innovation of doing something that I would say is innovative enough that it's kind of disruptive to what's going on in the marketplace, but it's not. But one of the challenges you can find sometimes is something that can be almost too innovative, that it's so far ahead of everyone else that no one can kind of wrap their heads around it.
Yeah, sure. It's timing is everything sometimes. Yeah.
Timing is everything sometimes. Yeah. I think that's one of the challenges, in all honesty, that I think Google Glass is going to have, is that it's so innovative and disruptive and ahead of the curve that people don't really. I don't think people really know what to do with it.
Yeah, yes. You sometimes have to also match the kind of the behavior. Is I mean, if you offer something that, although it's still like a piece of glass, if you offer something that is, like you said, too far ahead, people cannot really understand. They have the behavior pattern haven't matched the technology yet. So it's kind of, there's this big gap to be filled. And only like a few of us, and say us, maybe even not me. I don't have Google Glass. I mean, I have the opportunity to buy them because I live in the UK, but there's really, I don't see anyone outside the Silicon Valley using them. It's a fascinating funnel, basically. It's kind of a funnel that you just explain in your books. I will definitely recommend it to people. Maybe I will let Ivan, because I know I see him taking notes on the other side in Warsaw. So Ivan, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, like I said, I mean, I'm fascinated. I had the opportunity to read David's book, and of course, I mean, some of the collaborators on the book are good friends of the show, like Jeremiah Ouyang, some friends like Brian Solis and others. One thing that I wanted to ask you is about the term, disruption. I am a speaker, and I have the opportunity to present at many conferences, and very often when I talk about disruptive innovation, disruptive thinking, one of the things that I mention, and it's something that it's coming time and time again, is the term disruption is starting to become a kind of a buzzword. But also, that doesn't mean that it's not important. Same as innovation. The problem that a lot of organizations misunderstand innovation. They think that innovation is just making incremental improvements into a product, and all of a sudden they are innovative. So I wanted to ask you, what is your take about this? The disruption as a concept, and how would you explain to these companies, to these organizations, that they need to start, thinking in a disruptive way, otherwise they're going to be left behind?
So first, I would say that my background, as we talked about before, I was trained as a historian and kind of tracking these trends over time throughout history. And one of the things that you learn when you're trained to track trends over time is you look at shifts in language, right? So the way that I think innovation tends to happen is, a lot of times there will be these people call them innovators or early adopters, and there's these people that are kind of working on these projects, and they're coming up with their own unique language and their own kind of terminology, and they're doing something really kind of purely kind of innovative, really kind of cool stuff. But it tends to be isolated from other people, right? There's little sort of pockets of innovation going on. And then what you start to find is that as those innovations start to go a little bit from the really, really early adopters into the more mainstream, I think it's critical that there's a kind of shared language. And so when I look at terms like disruption, I think it's a really good thing, because there starts to be an understanding of the core value around innovation and disruption. And the idea that I think when you're adopting the term disruption, you're also starting to understand, okay, it's not bad to fail. If things are going to be disrupted and there's change and there's uncertainty, it's okay to be testing things. It's okay to start thinking outside the box. It's okay to be a little more open, and kind of understanding that the future is going to be, you know, sort of constantly changing. So I think that actually you know, the mainstream kind of adoption of disruption now is a really good thing. I also think that when people talk about disruption, they're not making the mistake that was made, I think, in the first .com bubble, which is that, you know, they're talking about disruption in relationship to new business models and new industries. So they're not just like, you know, inflating the value, and they're not just trying to innovate for the sake of innovation. They're trying to do it to really, like, they're thinking about building viable businesses. They're thinking about building companies that can be acquired. They're thinking about entirely new revenue streams for companies that are struggling. And I think all of those things are kind of like associated with the word disruption. You know, certainly TechCrunch Disrupt, you know, coming out and then doing these series of conferences was a huge thing. You know, of course, one of the challenges that you have, and this kind of goes back to the sort of the criticism of the term, is that you know, people, I think innovation can be really hard. You know, it wouldn't be called innovation if it was easy, right? Because you're coming up with things that have never been done before, and that's really hard to do. And so I think one of the you know, dangers or challenges or concerns around the term disruption is people embracing it and not really understanding, like you know, they just want to be part of disruption because they think it's cool and they think that's what's going on next, but they might not necessarily really understand it. And so, but that again, I think, is one of the challenges when something trickles down from the innovators and early adopters into the mainstream, is that you know, things tend to the intentions of innovators and adopters the intentions of their products and services tends to change as they reach into the mainstream, as people have different motivations for adopting them as well. You know, I think that you know, one of the key learnings there is that when you come up with an innovation, I think one of the hardest things for companies and for founders of companies, or for people that are kind of on the product side, is a lot of times they get attached to a particular way that their product should be used, right? They think, I'm going to disrupt this industry in a particular way, and then oftentimes when the product starts getting out there, people want to use it in entirely different ways. And I think one of the biggest challenges that that leaders have and the innovators have is being able to iterate and understanding that the marketplace may adopt their products in new and different ways than maybe they originally intended. And there's a certain kind of you know, sort of give and take or sort of flow that you have to get into, of potentially optimizing your product roadmap, optimizing your marketing messaging, and optimizing your positioning based upon how people actually respond to your product. And I think there's, you know, there's just a lot of uncertainty involved in scaling from kind of an idea to testing a product to actually getting it out into the marketplace, you know, to going from, you know, 10 to 100 to 10,000 to 1 million users. You know, things kind of evolve and change over time.
I would add, I mean, I really like what you said about the wording disruption, and I think that, I mean, like you said, it's like the famous adoption curve that it gets out in the more adopted. Obviously, terms gonna get skewed and misunderstood, and also like co-opted. That's okay. That's like language, right? It's semantics. If you think about it, we can even argue that in the 70s, what we call now innovation was called progress, and it's the same. Basically, it's a lot of semantics, but at the end of the day, what is important, what is behind it, is the actual dynamics and the actual people, you know, like you just mentioned, for products, and it could be applied for all the chapters you actually talk in your book. This is actually the dynamics. It's true that, you know, consultants, and I can be, as a consultant, sometimes we can be guilty of that. We tend to use these words, obviously, and then they become lingo, and at some point they also kind of lose their value. But the business models and the dynamics behind them are still important. Now, what I want to ask you is that you're in Dubai. Your first book was actually also touching upon a little bit of these the touching point between the West and East, and you talked about as well about TechCrunch. So when all these concepts together, the question is, we see a lot of the disruption and innovation, or so-called disruption, so-called innovation, no matter. We see a lot of at least the noise coming up from the United States, especially the Silicon Valley, obviously, a little bit New York, where you are apparently from, where you live there. But having lived myself in Asia, I lived in the Philippines, I lived in Japan, you of course see that stuff is not only happening there. And more and more people are waking up to that fact. Obviously, there are some people like Dave McClure who've been running around the world for quite some time. Some others don't. But is it something that you see yourself? Is it something that you did kind of a rebalancing between the noise in coming from the Silicon Valley, and suddenly to the Silicon Valley realizing, oh, there's something called WeChat in China. It has like 800 million, users or whatever. So this is interesting to see. But do you see that being based in Dubai, in between these two worlds? Is it something you see yourself and that you probably are interested in as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I've been in Dubai now for about 3 months. And so the company that I work for, Dubizzle, we have the largest peer-to-peer marketplace in the Middle East, and there's so much diversity across the region. But it's interesting that this part of the world, particularly like Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and UAE, we have some of the highest adoption rates of social media and smartphones in the world. In many cases, higher than most parts of the U.S., and a lot of that is entirely organic. So it's not like YouTube or Facebook were actively marketing in Saudi Arabia, and yet they have the highest adoption rates in the world of like YouTube and smartphones and Twitter. And so this the high adoption rates over here are incredibly fascinating from an innovation perspective, and I think part of that, and then you also have, I think, in this part of the world, you have a lot of these kind of the deep values that come from Islam and the traditional nomadic cultures of the region of sharing and community and collaboration, and so there's this kind of interesting mix where you take these kind of values of sharing and collaboration in the region and layer on top of them these tools that allow them to facilitate the community organization and sharing of ideas, and you get this really kind of rich sort of cauldron of ideas and all this kind of really cool stuff going on. And then to sort of to go back to what you said in the beginning, my first book was called Red Bull to Buddha: Innovation and the Search for Wisdom. And that book was really, I got a little kind of burned out, in all honesty, after the economy crashed, and from my perspective, I saw the economic crash as kind of the culmination of, or sort of the end of a certain way of living in the U.S. is kind of coming to an end. This idea that you're constantly overspending beyond your means and living on credit and kind of consuming excessively. So I ended up, at the time I was at an agency running social media for Volkswagen. I was being groomed to kind of be the head of the New York office, and it was this incredible career opportunity. But I felt like there was a need to tell this story about this new era that was kind of coming. So I ended up actually, quitting my job, and I bought a one-way ticket to Thailand.
Awesome.
And traveled for I traveled for 6 months through Southeast Asia and India. And so that book is about finding the balance between disruption and traditional conceptions of community and wisdom. The title Red Bull to Buddha actually comes from when I was in Chiang Mai. So Chiang Mai means walled city, and so it's the second largest city in Thailand, and it's kind of the epicenter of Buddhism in the region. And historically, the city was conquered by the Burmese and the Thai empires, and every time one empire conquered the city, they would build a new Buddhist temple. So it's kind of this like living museum of Buddhist architecture. And so I was walking around and just kind of awestruck of all this incredible architecture and the culture there, and I came across all of these offerings of Red Bull to the Buddha. That there were these little bottles of Red Bull put into these glasses, and I thought, what is going on? And so I go through all these kind of thought experiments in the book of what could this be, I'd studied, and I'd studied Buddha. Red Bull's marketing, and I consider them to be one of the most innovative brands in the world. But of course, within the context of devotional Buddhism, people often offer food and they offer drinks and stuff, and actually Red Bull was originally from Thailand.
Exactly. Yeah, I was about to say that. Yeah.
And so people would drink these little bottles of Red Bull when they're working in the rice fields or they're working in these sweatshop-like conditions. And so offering this bottle is kind of like a form of sustenance to the Buddha. And so within that context, it makes sense. But of course, when you look at it from the perspective of how Red Bull is used in the
extreme sports.
It's extreme sports and Red Bull and vodka at the nightclubs and all this stuff. Yeah.
I just before I give you to Ivan something to say, I was just what you just mentioned is really interesting because the part of people, you mentioned your company that you offer a layer of basically you offer them a way to share that it's already embedded in the culture. That's exactly the different the opposite of the example of Google Glass. You have a behavioral pattern that is already there, and you offer them a way to actually augment it for people that already share the stuff. And I would say that having lived in emerging countries myself, the collaborative economy, and this is one of your topic in this book, and I know this is a topic also that you care about as a person, the collaborative economy, the dynamics and the foundations of the collaborative economy are already found in emerging countries because there was no this overconsumption you just mentioned about. There is some, obviously, right? But there was no this possibility of overconsumption and living on credit that you mentioned about the U.S. and that we're also guilty of here in Europe. So it's interesting to see that there are some bridges here in terms of the behavior, again, the behaviors of people that had to share, and they were always sharing. It's partially from obviously culture and religion. It's also due to restrictions of either access or money or investments, or they had to. And suddenly you have these two, these collaborative economy that people talk about, especially from the Silicon Valley, and you have the foundation and the dynamics found in emerging markets. And basically, you can actually layer these two on top of them. It is a bit what you're doing, or if I get that right, correct?
Totally, yeah. And that's what really drew me to my current role. It was a chance to combine all the stuff that I've been, sort of build upon this foundation of stuff that I've been doing in innovation in New York for the last 10 years. And I think that the thing that's interesting about innovation in New York, which is different from Silicon Valley, is the startup culture in New York thinks very much about revenue from the beginning.
Yeah.
I think that there's a mindset in Silicon Valley that you don't need to think about how you're going to make money until you have like 10 million users.
Mm-hmm.
I think as a result of that, it's like a lot of there's a lot of failures that come out of Silicon Valley, but that's sort of an aside. But the thing that drew me to coming here was the chance to kind of take all this sort of background in innovation with all of the studies that I did at Princeton in my PhD studies in religion and culture, and really just kind of sort of pull them together and do some really kind of cool stuff. From our perspective at Dubizzle, Dubizzle is basically the core of our business is we're a classified site.
Yeah.
And so we're the largest peer-to-peer marketplace in the Middle East, but we don't think of ourselves as a classified site. What we think about in terms of our core mission is to bring an end to consumer exploitation. So when you think about the region before there was the kind of the web and mobile, and all these kind of different sharing startups, is that it's really hard to get a fair price. It's really hard to know, you know, for example, you know, is this apartment really, you know, is the price that they're telling me really the price that I should be paying? Is this car the price that I should be paying? Is the salary amount fair? And so from our perspective, like our mission is to kind of bring an end to consumer exploitation, to provide a little more transparency in the marketplace. But one of the things that I think I've also kind of learned since I've gotten here is that the classified space is in many ways the base of the collaborative economy pyramid. That, you know, you're not gonna be interested in an Airbnb or an Uber or something like that if you don't feel comfortable looking for a job online, or looking for an apartment, or buying a car or something like that. And I think one of the things that I was really kind of surprised about was, you know, coming from the U.S., you know, Craigslist is obviously the dominant player in the classified space. And you know, there's been a lot of talk over the years about how there was this huge missed opportunity for them to kind of innovate and build community, and the leadership team there, you know, Craig Newman was really kind of adamantly against innovating and wanted to just be kind of, you know, very simple. And I think as a result of that, you know, like the idea of you know, getting a job or a car or an apartment or selling things online seems so basic to me that I didn't really even think about it. And so one of the things that I'm finding really interesting since I'm here is that there's a certain, even though the adoption rates are incredibly high with mobile and social technologies, that there's still a bit of a learning curve in terms of getting people to actually use the internet to buy and sell and build communities in the real world. So you know, that's one of the things that I think I'm kind of super excited about being here, is there's a chance to build a business in a way that also kind of empowers the economy across the whole region.
Ivan?
Fascinating stuff, fascinating stuff. We want to be conscious of your time because we can continue to talk for hours.
Oh yeah, same with me.
Yeah.
No, if you want, Ivan, if you want to ask a question, go ahead. I mean, it's
awesome. Well, just thinking about following up with the concept of the collaborative economy. I mean, this is something that, as you say, right now in Silicon Valley or in the States, this is like big news. You know, we have our friend Jeremiah Owyang bringing a lot of awareness, and you see the results of a lot of organizations really starting to embrace the concept. But as you mentioned, this is something that is deep in the DNA of people, and this is deep in the DNA of many societies. And talking about this opportunity that you had, you and Paul, of working across different cultures and working across different you know, time zones, what do you see as the future of the collaborative economy when you connect it with this element of disruption that all this technology is bringing on? What do you see as changes in people's behaviors based on this new opportunity that these technologies give us?
Well, I think first, I think in these different, you know, some people refer to them as emerging markets or developing world, or you know, whatever the term you want to use. There's one of the unique opportunities is that there aren't a lot of legacy businesses and infrastructures that are in place to be disrupted in the first place, right? So it's not like you're trying to build a collaborative model in the U.S. when there's so much competition, there's so much kind of, you know, established infrastructure. So there's kind of this greenfield opportunity to do sharing and kind of help empower people to collaborate in new ways. So that's one thing. But I think also, you know, there's I think in terms of the long-term opportunity, there's an opportunity to just, you know, you think, for example, of like something simple like a drill, you know, so, you know, there's no need for everyone to own a drill, right? You only use a drill maybe, you know, once a month or every couple of months, so why not allow people to share that within a community? I think, you know, when you're talking about innovations and the power of the collaborative economy, in regions where people may be making $2 to $10 per day, where they have very limited resources. There's opportunities to collaborate and share on very kind of basic essentials of living that a lot of people take for granted. I also think you have to think about the collaborative economy in relationship to Moore's law and technology continuing to get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. So in the next 5, 10, 20 years, everyone's going to be able, not everyone, but most people are going to be able to afford a smartphone or a tablet. Internet access will continue to get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. So you're going to have another billion, 2 billion people coming online for the first time. And so you think of collaboration on the village level or on a regional level. There's huge opportunities there. There's also kind of basic innovations going on in parts of Africa and India, where you have people doing banking around basic SMS, which is just incredible. In Kenya, for example, and Tanzania, more people have mobile bank accounts than they do real bank accounts, and businesses are now being able to accept payments just from basic SMS when someone walks into their store. So there's all these kind of really just incredible opportunities from an innovation perspective. Of course, when you have money exchanged by phones, that also eliminates corruption, right? So there's a whole kind of ways in which values start changing. One of the things that I always say is that innovation is like training wheels for larger shifts in behavior. So you think of this idea of just holding a phone in your hand, and all of a sudden you can connect with anyone on the planet. You can access any sort of piece of information. All of a sudden you're open and connected, and anything seems possible. What does that do to your sense of consciousness and self-esteem and your view of the world? I mean, it's really kind of fundamentally transformative. A lot of people that kind of were very kind of critical of social media, they started to say, oh, look at the kids, they're sharing pictures of themselves at parties, and they don't understand the future. Well, they do understand the future. That's why they're using things like Snapchat, and they're being very conscious of how they construct their online identities, right?
Oh yeah, totally agree with you. I mean, there's this tendency we have in this business, because you just say the change happens so fast. The media is always trying to catch up, and when I say media, I even include TechCrunch, and I like them. But of course, so suddenly you see a pattern that is only in 3 months, and people say, oh, this is the new thing, and privacy doesn't matter anymore, or kids are doing that, and you forget to look at it a bit like the longer term, which could be even only 5 years, and of course we don't even talk about generations, and you see that again the behavior of privacy hasn't changed that much. You adapt it to the technology and the enablers on top of it. Anyway, that's another discussion we could have for a long time. But in one thing I would like to add about what you just said about these opportunities that exist in emerging markets. One of the others is also financing, whereas I'm not talking about the money lending, which is also a big opportunity, but the financing of an idea, of innovation, which a lot of emerging markets, you see people complaining, and sometimes for good reasons, about the lack of angel investors or lack of venture capitalists, especially compared to what happens in the Silicon Valley and to some extent in cities like London, New York, and others. Suddenly you have this crowdfunding as well. I mean, it's not there yet, it's not fully bloomed yet, but suddenly you and me can actually invest in ideas, invest in people, invest in products. So this is also something that liberates some people. You have platforms to suddenly liberate ideas and innovation by themselves. I think
totally.
Yeah. Is there any closing words of wisdom you want to give us before we end the show? We went a little bit over time, but never mind, because it was a fascinating discussion. So anything you want to add, or maybe you want to talk about one last time about your book, or when to find you online? Maybe you can give the people also your the website where people can find you, Twitter, and etc. They will be on our website, but if you want, feel free.
Well, so I mean, first I would love to engage with people through. I think Twitter is probably the best forum for that. Of course, you can find my book at disruptrev.com, and that's available by donation So anyone can download it for free. I would certainly appreciate a small donation to help support the work. And then the last thing is that as part of my new role as head of innovation at Dubizzle, we're going to be working on a series of thematic interviews, and we're doing the first study of the collaborative economy throughout the Middle East in partnership with like WeShare and Shareable and WAMDA and a bunch of kind of big international partners. So we're going to be working on that over the course of the next year and a half or so. And so, you know, if you follow me on Twitter or stay in touch, you'll be able to learn a lot more about how the collaborative economy is really kind of helping to transform this region and you know, moving forward.
Okay, your Twitter is for people.
My Twitter is at Passiak.
Okay, great. So that
My last name, yeah.
Because many of the people that actually are tuning into the show will actually listen to the podcast. They might not otherwise know about it, so that's why.
Yeah.
Great. Ivan, any last words of wisdom from your Red Bull addicted?
Yeah, I'm Red Bull addicted. No, just wanted to thank David for this really fascinating conversation. I'm really happy that we have the opportunity to have this interaction, and I'm really looking forward to the next opportunity that we'll have to either have you get us as a show, or maybe if we can someday meet the three of us, maybe in Dubai, who knows, and get the opportunity to continue talking about this, because this is something that I think is really fascinating, and talking with people like you really gives me hope about, you know, expanding all these ideas about the incredible times that we are living today, and that companies and organizations and executives that do not understand that, I think that, you know, conversations like this are going to be a big eye-openers for them, and I thank you for that.
And the book.
Yeah.
And you should also read the book. The two of them, actually, the first one is really cool as well, but this book, they should definitely download, plus, you know, it's not even very expensive. David, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Bye-bye. Have fun in Dubai. Don't get out. It's really hot out there. I know. Stay in the air condition. And see you very soon. Bye-bye, everybody.
Great. Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.